in the ancestral home of the Ma family in Xinghua Lane. The golden armored god who had visited the town walked back to the yard. It was strange that such a big true god walked in all directions, but no one noticed. The young Ma Kongquan squatted on the steps outside the door. After seeing this golden armored god, his face was full of hope, and the Zhenwu Mountain military cultivator asked, "How?" The goddess was dressed in golden armor, and the treasure was solemn. I saw his lips move slightly. But Ma Kongquan couldn't hear any sound, so he looked at the sword repairer in the house. The latter sighed. He said that your grandmother committed too many sins in her lifetime. Before death, the 3 souls and 7 souls are already the same as the body, like the wind and candle. So after your grandmother died, the life and soul decayed at the same time. This town is different from other places, and it was born to resist ghosts and ghosts, so he did not find you, Grandma's remnant soul? Ma Kongquan's face was hideous. He raised his head and roared at the god general. I don't care what method you use, go and find my grandma's soul for me. Zhenwu Mountain Jiangxiu's face changed drastically, for fear that Ma Kongquan would annoy the true god Yin, and when he was about to speak out to stop the young man, Jinjia Shenren, for some unknown reason, said in the orthodox Mandarin of Dongbao Pingzhou, No, for it is impossible. After saying these words, the mighty god general shrouded in golden light looked at Zhenwu Mountain sword cultivator in the house. The latter took a deep breath, held incense with both hands, and bowed 3 times to the god general in the courtyard. Every time I prayed, there was a pale golden breath as thin as a hair wafting out of the Zhenwu Mountain sword Shu Niwan pill, and then gently inhaled into the nose by the golden armored god. After 3 times, the goddess rose from the ground and turned into a beam of bright light to leave this world. Zhenwu Jiangxiu's face was pale. He moved a chair and sat down, and let out a sigh of relief. This is the real reason for the popular saying, it's easy to ask God to send God away. After Ma Kongquan looked back with a cold expression, he turned around and walked into the house, sat next to the cold body, reached out and grabbed the old woman's dry palm. Staring at her face, the young man did not speak for a long time. The sword-carrying man took off the tiger talisman from his waist. The color was a little duller than before, and he slowly put it into his sleeve. The man with the sword rested for a while, got up and didn't go to the boy's side, but sat on the threshold with his back to the boy, and said slowly, Your grandma should be at the door, and was slapped on the face with great strength. The whole person, he was thrown into the house and died. There are some words that you may not like to hear, but you should at least know the truth. Most of the people who took the shot were Qi practitioners, and they didn't know the severity of the shot. In addition, your grandmother's body was not solid, so she died. Now, since it was a Qi practitioner who took action, most of it has something to do with Chen Ping'an and the girl from the other country in the mud bottle alley, or the young woman who was on the covered bridge before and whose mood of the water view was deliberately broken by you. The sex is very small. The latter is very likely. So you went to the mass grave to kill Chen Ping'an out of filial piety to your grandma. But you went there because of karma. But you never thought that when you went out, someone just came to the door to provoke him. Ma Kongquan stretched out a hand tremblingly and gently pressed the back of his hand to his grandma's cheek, which was swollen high and turned dark blue. The young man said, So I killed my grandma, right? The sword-carrying man said, According to the world's perspective, yes or no? If it is based on, Ma Kongquan didn't want to listen to this man anymore, stood up and said with a grinning smile, It can't be done to massacre the city and destroy the country, and it can't be done to kill innocent people indiscriminately. These things can't be done. And those things can't be done, then revenge and murder. Can't you do it? Without waiting for the man to give an answer, Ma Kongquan continued, If I can't even do this, then I'll be useful as a military cultivator. Why don't I just be a big devil who can do whatever I want? Why didn't I agree to the Taoist priest at that time? Go to such a sect? The man hesitated for a moment and said, As long as you can bear all the consequences yourself, that's fine. Like today, also. In fact, there are some things I may not have said thoroughly before. For example, when it comes to killing people, everyone has their own line. How many people you can kill and how many people I can kill are absolutely different. Not just because I compare you are strong and have a high realm. And a person's character is also very important. Maybe I killed 100 people. And all of them were people who should be killed. But if you only killed 2 or 3 people, there were people who shouldn't be killed. Ma Kongquan suddenly sneered and said, Whether to kill or not, how to kill. I ask you what you do. Do you still need your help? I almost forgot. I'm not an official Zhenwu Mountain disciple yet. The young man looked down at the old woman's face, then turned his head and roared at the 8 Immortals table in the main hall. Go and lead the way. A black cat rushed out from under the 8 Immortals table, and Ma Kongquan followed it to the outside of the house. Men don't care. You must know that the country where the man lives fell into turmoil 150 years ago. The mountains and rivers were broken, and the chaos of 100 years of war. The degree of inhumanity, the highest in East Aquarius, the last 1,000 million households. When the catastrophe ended in the new dynasty, only 80 households remained less than. So much so that in the end, many young children felt that after death, all the people in the world did not need to be collected and buried. A man is one of these children. The man stood up slowly. Rather than reminding Ma Kongquan that the murderer had been kicked out of the town, He wanted to go to Master Ruin and ask a question. Why is the Buddhist family in East Treasure Pingzhou, which has been declining for thousands of years, and only some small countries will regard it as a national teacher? Above this small town, it is also the weakest, but the cycle of cause and effect is so obvious. The strategist Jiang Xiu followed far behind the boy. Even if Ma Kexuan was already a disciple of Zhenwu Mountain, the man would not interfere too much in the youth's personal grievances. On the battlefield, you will live and die together, and you will be conceited about life and death on the road of cultivation. Of course, nothing is absolute. Just like Ma Kexuan almost died at the hands of Chen Ping'an before. The man rescued Ma Kexuan for two reasons. One was that he didn't want a genius like Ma Kexuan to die prematurely. He hoped that Ma Kexuan would die prematurely. Ken Neng worked hard at Zhenwu Mountain, and both his talent and temperament have improved to a higher level. I hope that the young man can become one of the representatives of the military family, and shine brightly in the next great strife and turmoil. The other is Mr. Qi, who took the initiative to speak, saying that Ma Kexuan and Chen Ping'an, two young people, just need to decide who wins and loses, not life and death. At that time, he thought that Mr. He was worried about the death of the boy in Mud Bottle Alley, but later found out that it was not the case at all. The man followed far behind the boy, and found that after Ma Kexuan experienced the initial passion, his footsteps became slower and slower, more relaxed, and finally he was like an ordinary boy shopping. It was just that when the black cat jumped from a roof to the shoulder of the boy, then jumped to the ground, turned his head, and ran away, as if to tell the boy that he had found his target. After that, the teenager started jogging, and his temperament changed again. The spring rain was subtle, but it made the pedestrians in the street hurry, far from the point of sheltering from the rain under the eaves. A pair of luxuriously dressed young men and women are walking from Keelong Lane to the street. They seem to have their own chances, and their faces are full of joy. It's just that a young man taught them what it means to be dependent on luck and misfortune. When he was 10 steps away, he shouted hello loudly, and when the young man turned his head to look, it was Ma Kexuan's unreserved, swift, and violent punch in the head. After the young man flew out and fell heavily on the street, his body twitched slightly, and there was no sign of struggling to get up. After a punch, the boy with both feet on the ground just happened to stand side by side with the young woman. Ma Kexuan twisted his figure, and his left hand flashed towards the woman's neck. The cultivator, who was half a head taller than him, was knocked to the ground by the boy's arm with a bang. The woman's head slammed into the muddy ground. Ma Kexuan stretched out a foot, stepped on the woman's forehead, stared at the dizzy face, bent down, and said in elegant Mandarin, "I know the murderer is no longer in the town, but it doesn't matter. I myself, you can check." The beautiful young woman. Her eyes were full of bloodshot eyes, blood oozing from her nose and ears, and she looked at the condescending dark boy with horror on her face. The young man's face was grim. Ma Kexuan, have ruined your cultivation heart. Jing, if you take revenge in the future, even if you chop me up to death with knives, I will accept my fate and never resent you. Even if you fail to take revenge, if I am in a good mood, I will let you go and play with you a few more times. In my opinion, the morals of the world should be so clear. The woman is estimated to be the arrogant son of her own sect. Where have she seen such a scene before? She was so frightened that she couldn't even remember what the vicious young man said. She just begged for mercy. "Let me go. Please let me go. Your grandma didn't kill me. I don't know it all." The teenager gradually increased the strength of the soles of his feet and slowly pressed the side of the woman's head into the mud. Do you know what I hate most about you? After making a crime, you can still take it so seriously. There is no guilt. No guilt. And The boy's speech was filled with tears, and his eyes were filled with bitter hatred. The woman stretched out her hand with difficulty and hugged Ma Kexuan's ankle, her eyes full of pity and pleading. "Let me go. My grandfather is the commander of the Haichao Iron Cavalry. I am his most beloved granddaughter. I can compensate you. You want, I can promise anything." The young man smiled and said without a smile, "Oh, it's such a coincidence that I am the grandson of my grandma Malanua." The boy suddenly raised his feet a little, and then wiped the soles of the shoes on the woman's delicate cheeks. "Isn't it an iron cavalry on the sea tide? Wait, I'll play with you slowly." The young man put away his feet and turned his head to look in the left and right directions. On the left, a man from Zhenwu Mountain stood in the distance, holding his sword. On the right-hand side, there is an elegant young man holding an oil paper umbrella, standing beside the poor man who fell to the ground, looking at Ma Kexuan. Ma Kexuan's intuition told him that the guy holding the umbrella was actually waiting for him to kill the woman at his feet. Ma Kexuan suddenly squatted down. The woman tried to escape, and the wet boy grabbed her neck. After the woman didn't dare to move, the boy released his hand and slapped the woman's cheek with his palm, smiling. "Remember, stay. My name is Ma Kexuan. I will definitely find you in the future. And the guy who is not in the town, you must thank him well. Otherwise, our relationship will not be so good." Ma Kexuan finally spit out a mouthful of saliva on the woman's face. The boy got up and walked towards the man in Zhenwu Mountain, and asked in a low voice, "Who is that person?" Jiang Xiu said indifferently, "It is one of the 72 Confucian Academy, the future mountain owner of Guanhu Academy, named Ming Huang, with a distinguished background. This time, he is also here to retrieve the thing of victory. The city is very deep. Be careful in the future. If you don't unexpectedly, you have already been targeted by him." Ma Kexuan frowned and said, "This person is very different from Mr. Shueshuqi." Jianshou laughed dumbly and said, "Do Do you think a few scholars can stick to their hearts like Mr. Qi? He hesitated for a moment, but still explained. It is rumored that Mr. Qi's realm fell, and his state of mind was broken after his teacher was defeated. So he agreed to be banished to this small world. Although he is constantly eroded by the pressure of heaven, he is able to do whatever you want. I don't think so. Makuchuan was not interested in these things. He turned his head and saw the man with the umbrella squatting beside the woman. He should be comforting and comforting. Ma Kushin retracted his gaze and walked side by side with the sword-carrying man. The boy walked back to Xinghua Lane with heavy steps. The man opened his mouth and said, "Your body is not lightly injured, so don't leave a dark illness. Otherwise, it will hinder your future cultivation." Ma Kushin stretched out his hand to wipe the rain off his face, and suddenly asked, "What is our town to those outsiders?" Yang Shu replied, "It's like the small stream outside the town, where fish and dragons are mixed. There are shallow water beaches that are no more than knees, and there are deep pools that are bottomless." Ma Kushuan asked, "Have foreigners come here to practice treasure hunting before, and have they drowned?" Gensho smiled, shook his head and said, "It was almost impossible before. Most of them were happy to make money. This time is an exception." In the Yang family shop, a heroic girl carried a teenager quickly across the threshold and asked a middle-aged shop assistant, "Is Mr. Yang here?" Seeing the girl's extraordinary bearing, the man didn't dare to neglect, nodded and said, "I just finished packing the herbs in the backyard. What are you doing?" The girl nodded and said solemnly, "We are familiar with Old Man Yang, and we want to ask him for a medicine." The guy hesitated for a moment, without entanglement, and led them to the main house in the backyard. An old man was gently knocking on the table with an old cigarette stick. In the corner of the house stood a sloppy man who was the janitor in the east of the town. The bachelor Zheng Dafeng may be one thing down, another thing. When Zheng Dafeng met the old man Yang, he looked like he didn't dare to breathe. Old man Yang waved his cigarette stick, and Zheng Dafeng quickly slipped out of the house and left with the shop assistant. Old man Yang looked at the familiar young man behind the girl, Chen Pingan. Chen Pingan's lips were white at this time, his body was trembling, and his hands were almost desperately around the girl's neck. The old man Yang stood up unhurriedly, with one hand holding the back, the other holding the cigarette stick. He came to the girl, looked at the boy, and said hoarsely, "How many times have I told you? The more cheap and fortunate, the more you have to cherish your life and your fortune. Why? If you encounter some setbacks, you will die or live. So why didn't you go with your mother in the first place? Wouldn't it be easier?" You Master Yao is right. Look at the old when you are 3 years old. You are not a long-lived person. Even if you teach you good craftsmanship and real kung fu, it is a waste, and you have to throw it into the ground early. Ning Yao was stunned. In her impression, Old Man Yang should be a kind-hearted old man who is smiling all day long. Who would have thought to be such a bitter old man? The old man sneered. "Does it hurt?" Chen Pingan nodded slightly and was speechless for a long time. At that time, when the girl woke up on her back, the effect of the drug had probably faded. In fact, the attack had already started at that time. But Chen Pingan felt that he could hold on. When Ning Yao carried him to the vicinity of the covered bridge, he knew how he couldn't hold it any longer. So Ning Yao didn't even bother to retrieve the knife on the road by the stream. So he hurried to Yang's shop behind his back. The old man smiled and said, "It hurts, so just bear it." Then the old man glanced at Ning Yao and said angrily, "Let him sit on the bench by himself." The old man immediately muttered, "It's not too bad for a little girl to carry it on her back." Ning Yao Qiang held back his anger and carefully let Chen Pingan sit on the bench. But as soon as she let go, the teenager was shaky. Ning Yao was about to stretch out his hand to help him. But although the boy couldn't speak, his eyes still indicated that he didn't need her help. The old man took a puff of homemade dry cigarettes, looked at the boy's body and weather, and said, "It's a veritable shabby settlement. Well, you have a clear conscience." The old man was completely indifferent to the piercing pain of the young man. "What kind of life is Lu Xianyang? And what kind of life are you? I don't know what to do for so many years. If he died once, it's almost enough for you to die 10 times. You know?" Ning Yao really couldn't stand the old man's yin and yang words, and said solemnly, "Mr. Yang, can you help Chen Pingan to relieve the pain first?" The old man was hunched, turned his head and squinted at the girl, and asked lightly, "Are you a man?" Ning Yao glared at each other. The old man ignored the girl, turned around and looked at the boy. The old man lost himself in thought. In the end, the old man pouted, sighed, and placed the old cigarette rod on Chen Ping's shoulder, and twice on each of his arms and legs. In an instant, the teenager was lying on his side, with his elbows against his head. On the bench, the old man shouted softly, "Go to sleep." Chen Pingan instantly closed his eyes and fell asleep, and immediately snored like thunder. Under the archway of the government office, Chen Du chatted with many strange people and anecdotes from all over the world. The little girl in Zhengyang Mountain listened with relish and said, "Sister, you know a lot." Chen smiled and said, "When you grow up, you will know a lot of things." Song Jixin said half truth and half truth. "I usually get along with you, and I feel that you are quite a normal person." The woman raised her eyebrows slightly and asked, "What do you mean?" In front of Song Changjing, the king of your Dali domain, you should lower your eyebrows to please your eyes and bow your knees. Song Jixin laughed and pointed at Chen Duan. "Girl, how many ways you are talking? If Mr. T from our small town school overhears him, he will frown. You know, you are called nonsense. This is the other, which is very unreasonable. At first glance, it seems quite reasonable, but in fact it can't stand scrutiny. What I really mean is, of course, that you don't have to be flattering to Song Changjing, and you shouldn't be. But he Song Changjing is anyway. The biggest local snake in Dali is still the leading martial arts master, right? As an outsider, you do as the locals do. And you should be a little more polite to the owner of a house, shouldn't you? Why do you have to pretend to be a master with a stinky face? You after pretending? He was beaten to death by Song Changjing, and he dared to speak harshly in front of him. I really don't know how to say hello. In the end, Song Jiksen pointed to himself and laughed at himself. Even someone like me who is mean-spirited knows how to judge the situation and decide what to eat. Chengdu hesitated for a while and said, "It's considered to be repelled by the same kind. I am also a martial artist. To tell the truth, I have never really regarded you as a martial artist from East Treasure Pingzhou. Of course, I was proved wrong in the end." "Wrong," Song Jiksen said in surprise. "You are real enough," Chen Duan said indifferently. "People who practice martial arts don't recognize fists. But what can they recognize?" Song Jiksen suddenly asked a sharp question. "You foreigners who come to the town to find treasure opportunities? It seems that the truth is not the same as we think. Is it because your fists are hard?" Chen shook his head and smiled. "I don't need to explain anything at all. As long as you leave the town in the future, you will soon become people like us. When you set foot on the road of cultivation, you will naturally understand. Otherwise, I will break it." "Mouth? You don't understand either," Song Jiksen said with emotion. "It's so boring to become someone like you." The little girl joked. "Then go to our Zhenyang mountain to play. It's interesting." Song Jiksen touched her little head and said casually, "Okay." Chengdu turned his head and looked a little nervous. "I saw the Dali Domain King in the white robe and jade belt standing on the side of the archway and said to Song Jiksen, 'Go back to the mud bottle alley to pack up and prepare to leave here.'" Song Jiksen smiled and said, "Okay, this is about to leave home." The little girl was reluctant to part and asked, "Leaving your hometown with a well on your back? Did you leave your hometown with a well on your back?" Song Jiksen laughed, got up and said, "Let's go. Send you back to the Li family's house first. This is called a beginning and an end." Song Jiksen led the little girl to the gate of the government office, turned around and asked, "There won't be assassins on this Fulu street outside the door, right?" Song Changjing smiled and said, "You have to ask your neighbors and friends." Song Jiksen pouted, turned to look at the sky. Dark clouds gathered, and there were signs of rain. His mood suddenly became very bad. After sending Taozi back from Zhengyang Mountain, Song Jiksen was surprised to find that Song Changjing was standing under the tree of the descendant. He walked quickly and asked curiously, "You are in such a hurry to leave?" Song Changjing nodded and said, "I received a message temporarily. There is something outside that needs to be resolved in person. So I took the carriage directly to Mud Bottle Alley and left after packing up." Song Jiksen raised his eyes and saw that there were 3 carriages parked outside the entrance of the government office. Song Jiksen bent down and sat in the carriage of the frontmost carriage, followed by Song Changjing. Sitting cross-legged, Song Jiksen looked around, and the only thing that was empty was the straw futon under his butt. This made Song Jiksen a little disappointed. Originally, the teenager was looking forward to seeing Zhigui's surprise when he boarded the carriage. The densely packed horseshoes made a crisp sound on the bluestone street, and 3 carriages drove out of Fulu Street one after another. Song Changjing lifted the curtain and looked at the town outside the car window. From now on, the Dali dynasty would completely lose its nominal control over this small cave. But on the other hand, since the founding of Dali, it is precisely because of the huge benefits brought by this small cave that it has gradually changed from a small separatist force in a corner to the largest secular dynasty in the northern part of Aquarius. 1. Thousands of miles of rivers and mountains and small caves. In the future, I am afraid I can only find it in the secret history of the Dali Palace. Song Changjing put away his thoughts and asked casually, "Don't you say goodbye to that Chen Pingan?" After driving out of Fulu Street, the road was uneven. Song Jiksen's body began to shake gently with the carriage, shaking his head and said, "Whether that guy can survive? It's hard to say. If one waits for a corpse, how disgusting. He Chen Pingan without a father or mother, and now even a good friend is dead. Isn't it my neighbor who has to deal with his funeral?" Song Changjing hummed. Song Jiksen asked. "The little girl from Zhenyang Mountain mentioned a person named Ma Kushuan from Xinghua Lane, about the same age as me. It seems that he offered a bag of support money to give Chen Pingan, and the hiding place was sold to Zhenyang Mountain. Do you know the origin of this guy? I only heard that he was a fool before, and I never wanted to hide it so deeply." Song Changjing thought for a while. The assassin who was lurking in the Song family before assassinated the Desui prince in Kalong Lane, and a little clue has been found, which involves this young man named Ma Kushuan. The assassin who was the prisoner had many personal contacts with Ma Kushuan in private, which may have been a relationship between master and apprentice. Now that Zhenwu Mountain is intervening, it can only be put on hold for the time being. The official position is not low. Song Jiksen smiled and said, "Uncle, did you say can only sometimes?" Song Changjing didn't take it seriously and said, "Who made this king still have a big tail? A bullshit king of Li Domain?" When the carriage approached Mud Bottle Alley, Song Jiksen said intentionally or unintentionally, "Chen Pingan. Is it really just Chen Pingan?" Song Changjing laughed dumbly. "Before letting you move to Mud Ping Lane, the government office has thoroughly checked it out. Chen Pingan's family has 18 generations of ancestors. He has a very clear context, and there is no problem. I don't care why that Chen pair scare you. Don't worry. This king has roughly guessed her identity, her Chen family. and Chen Ping'an's ancestors left in the town have nothing to do with it. So relax. Chen Ping'an is just Chen Ping'an. The one who is barely related to relatives is the Chen family in Longwei County where Chen Songfeng lives. But think about it. Relatives who haven't been in contact for hundreds of years are still relatives. Furthermore, the Chen family in the small town has become so desolate that there is only one person left who is not a servant or maid, poor in the busy city and no one to ask, and rich in the mountains with distant relatives. You have read some books, but you don't even understand the truth. Song Jiksen still didn't give up. What about the 18th generation, before the 18th generation of the ancestors? Hasn't there ever been a great person with amazing talent? Not one. Song Changjing smiled and said, "So you want Chen Ping'an to be special?" Song Jiksen did not hide his thoughts, nodded and said, "If he is different from ordinary people, I will feel better in my heart." Song Changjing became more and more curious and joked, "How on earth did that guy bully you and make you so obsessed?" But according to my understanding of the young man, it doesn't seem like a... Song Jiksen sneered and interrupted Dali's words. People from small places may not have high vision and shallow eye sockets, but they must not be considered stupid. Good or good. The heart of a child is simple and kind, and bad. It will also be so bad that the top of the head is sore and the bottom of the foot is pus. And some people are really stupid and hopeless. Even stupid and bad. Song Changjing was even more puzzled. Which category does Chen Ping'an belong to? Song Jiksen sighed and said angrily, "He doesn't count for any of them. He's really a fool." That's why I feel particularly aggrieved. Ning Yao squatted in front of the bench and looked at Chen Ping'an's sleeping face carefully. His heart was full of shock. Such magical powers are indescribable. Chen Ping'an's strange sleeping position made the boy from head to toe, showing a sense of returning to the basic, although Ning Yao can't tell the truth. The girl has an extremely keen intuition when it comes to the quality of a magical technique. Ning Yao turned his head and asked curiously, "Are you the leader of Chen Ping's practice?" The old man smoked a cigarette, crossed his legs, looked at the dark rain outside the house, and said with a smile, "Practice. This is considered practice. Why? Now there is another guy in the outside world who is qualified to establish a religion and be called an ancestor. It caused the world to decline. And the situation on the road of practice is not as good as every year. It is not so. Those few are not vegetarians. Since they are, he has already become a glutton, so he can only continue on this road of no return, and will never allow outsiders to share a piece of the pie." Ning Yao was at a loss. "Senior Yang, what are you talking about?" The old man was stunned. "Didn't your parents tell you the old accounts of those old antiques?" Ning Yao shook his head. "My grandfather's generation left early, and my parents didn't like to tell stories about other worlds, for fear that I would run away from home." The old man Yang turned his head to looked at the girl carefully, and finally came up with a sentence. "How many characters are carved on that wall now?" Ning Yao answered honestly. "My grandfather's generation produced many heroes. So in just 100 years, 2 new characters were engraved, and now there are characters in total." The old man sighed. "It's already 18 characters. Daofa, Horan, Sitian. After 6 characters. What more are there?" Ning Yao said solemnly. "The 4 characters of Thunder and Pond are heavy, and the 4 characters of Longevity of Sword Qi are another 4 characters. Qi, Chen, Dong." Old man Yang frowned and asked, "Little girl, there is still a word left. Have you eaten it?" Ning Yao said angrily, "Forget it." The old man didn't break the casserole to ask the question to the end, but changed the question. It's still the old rule. Every time you kill an Ascension Realm monster, can you be qualified to engrave a word on the Great Wall? Ning Yao frowned and said, "Why do you know so much about the situation in my hometown?" The old man smiled and said, "A long time ago, there was an outsider sword cultivator who had the habit of writing travel notes. He wrote down all the customs along the way, and finally died near our town. So I took back the thick travel notes. Turn it over when there is nothing to do." Ning Yao doubts the veracity of this statement. The old man seemed to have eyes on his back. Believe it or not, Ning Yao observed Chen Ping'an's state, a bit like a Taoist meditation or Buddhist meditation, and asked, "What's wrong with him?" The old man Yang said slowly, "Little death. People sleep as little death." Ning Yao was a little helpless. "Young Jepuzi," the old man, was either harsh or weird. The old man said to himself, "Little girl, let me ask you, when a person meditates in his heart, what kind of voice is the so-called voice of the heart?" Ning Yao was stunned for a while, lost in thought. Soon she closed her eyes naturally, then fell asleep, and finally she nodded suddenly and fell asleep. The old man Yang stood up, walked around the girl, came to the boy, pointed at Ning Yao with a cigarette stick, and said to the boy, "Look at people. A few words can break through the situation in one fell swoop. And look at it again. You don't have the ability to fart. You like to be stubborn. Who are you stubborn? How many years have you been dozing off? God is willing to take care of a guy like you." Old man Yang returned to his original position and sat, looking at the gradually growing rain curtain outside the house. The sudden raindrops hit the courtyard floor, crackling. And the old man looked a little sad. "I never thought about it, but I am the one with the least hope, and my life is the hardest." A thin child, carrying a large basket of wild vegetables, with 7 or 8 small fish skewered in his hands, was walking in the alley. After the child opened the door of his own yard, he just walked into the yard. Next door, immediately, there was a little boy in a satin shirt. He stepped on the stool, climbed up the low courtyard wall skillfully, and squatted there. ignoring the dirty, expensive clothes, and said with a smile, "Hey, the surname is Chen, and I'm going up and down the mountain again. Are you slicing food? Your ability to rely on mountains to eat mountains and water is really not small. Can you take me to play with you in the future? I will give you copper coins as a reward." The skinny child smiled. "You don't need to give money." The rich and noble boy curled his lips and said, "Don't pull it down. I'm not willing to go." The child plucked those small fish from the dog's tail grass one by one. The big ones were as long as a palm, and the small ones were no longer than the length of a thumb. The child stood on tiptoe and placed them on the windowsill of his house to expose them to the sun. They were dried and eaten without salt. There is no need to open the stomach and squeeze out the internal organs. It is not that the child is afraid of trouble, because if this is done, there will be only a few tails of meat left. Anyway, it tastes crunchy and fragrant. After the young man on the courtyard wall finished speaking, he actually regretted it a little. In fact, he had always envied his neighbors of the same age. Every time he came home, he would never come home empty-handed. It's not greedy, it's just greedy. But he is not willing to change his words if he is stronger. And seeing the brisk and carefree appearance of the surname Chen next door, he is a little gloomy. "You say that you are Chen Ping'an? You are so poor that you can't open the pot every day. You sleep in a dilapidated house that leaks from all sides. And you can't even eat a bunch of candied haws all year round? What are you happy about?" The little boy named Song Jiksin on the wall was completely incomprehensible. One day, a child who had nothing to do but could only live in Mud Bottle Alley. When he returned home, his nose was blue and his face was swollen and covered in mud. The girl who had just become his personal maid asked him what was wrong, but Song Jiksin didn't say anything. After returning to his room, he closed the door and lay on the bed. He quarreled with people today, and even got into a fight. There are some vicious words that still linger in my ears, making this child with strong self-esteem like a knife. His face is sometimes sad, and sometimes hideous. Don't you have a bit of stinky money? You are so proud of yourself. You are not even as good as Chen Ping'an. Although they have died, they still know who their parents are. Do you know who your parents are? The child surnamed Song tossed and turned on the bed, unable to fall asleep. The next day, instead of squatting on the wall to chat with the neighbors as usual, the child went to Chen Ping'an's house for the first time ever. After he said a word to Chen Ping'an, it didn't take long for Chen Ping'an to leave the town, violating the oath that his mother had promised when he died, and went to Longyao as an apprentice at a young age. There was a figure standing sneakily at the back door of the shop's main hall. After seeing it, Old Man Yang didn't say anything, just turned around, disgusting it. The figure was particularly injured after seeing the old man's movements. What hurt him even more was a woman who he should call his sister-in-law. She held an umbrella with one hand and pushed his head away with the other. She strode towards the main house in the backyard. When she saw the old man, she immediately shouted loudly. The old man Yang sighed, quickly got up and walked out of the room, closed the door, stood on the steps, and looked at the woman who was in a posture of asking for guilt. The old man was not even interested in smoking dry cigarettes. The woman stopped and scolded with one hand on her hip. "What are you doing? How are you guarding against thieves? Old man Yang, you are my man's master anyway. Why do you do all these wicked things? Lear is a well-behaved shop assistant. Why did you let him get out of the way? Did you open the Yang family shop? Did Lear sleep with his mistress or his master's daughter?" The man who was blocked from the street shrank his neck and hid by the back door, hoping to dig a hole and bury himself. What kind of temperament is the master? And what kind of virtue does Lear and his wife have? The old man Yang was expressionless. "I'm done. I'll go home and call Chun when I'm done. I heard that the cat meowing in the westernmost part of the town doesn't stop throughout the year, and it also meows during the day and at night, and many people moved because of the noise." The woman seemed to be said to be sad, and her voice rose again. "You're an immortal. You have the nerve to say go home. Your apprentice has no means of living, and he knows how to wander around all day long. The roof of our house collapsed 2 days ago. I can't even get the money for sewing repairs, so I had to take Jinshan Yinshan back to my mother's house, and I was bullied. If Lear hadn't kicked you out of the shop, our family of 4 would have been so miserable. Young old man, quickly take out the coffin and repair the house for our family. Otherwise, I will not finish with you today." The old man looked coldly at the man who was hiding. "Zheng Dafeng," Zheng Dafeng said with a sad face. "Master, Lear has gone to do that thing according to your old instructions, and he will definitely not be back for a while." The old man's face was gloomy. Zheng Dafeng even had the heart to kneel and kowtow. The woman lost her oil paper umbrella and sat on the ground in the rain, sobbing. "I like to pick up ashes, even my apprentice's daughter-in-law." The old man moved to a small bench under the eaves, sat down slowly, took out shredded tobacco from the pocket at his waist, rolled it into a ball and put it into a pipe, smoked a dry cigarette, looked up at the sky, and ignored the woman at all. Zheng Dafeng watched the woman rolling around in the yard. It was raining so hard. The woman had a plump figure in thin clothes, so that the Yang family's shop came to join in the fun. The woman cried so hard that she stopped abruptly, as if someone was strangling her neck. After rubbing her eyes, she quickly got up, picked up the oil paper umbrella, and ran away. The woman ran and shouted, "There's a ghost?" The old man twitched the corners of his mouth and said, "The rat shit on the incense table is hated by gods and ghosts." As soon as the troubled woman left, there was no more beautiful scenery to see, and the crowd in the Yang family shop quickly dispersed. Zheng Dafeng shrank his head and ran to the main eaves, squatting in the distance, not daring to get too close to old man Yang. The same apprentice. He and Lear were treated differently in front of this master. Zheng Dafeng also complained about master's partiality, but there are some things that really can't be accepted. Zheng Dafeng asked timidly, "Master, Qi Jingchun is determined to follow the rules, and what will we do then?" The old man didn't say a word, smoking a dry cigarette. A black cat did not know when and where it came, squatted not far from the old man's feet, shook its fur, and splashed a lot of rain. Zheng Dafeng said worriedly, "The guy from Zhenwu Mountain actually asked God to come down the mountain? Will there be trouble? After all, there are countless people staring here now." The old man still did not speak. Getting used to his master's taciturnity, Zheng Dafeng didn't feel embarrassed. He thought wildly, thinking of Qi Jingchun again, and cursed, "Damn you! Qi Jingchun has been a grandson for 59 years, and you still have a few days left. Scholars are dead-headed, unreasonable." The old man finally spoke. "If you don't study, you're dead brains." Zheng Dafeng was not ashamed, turned his head and flattered. "Would you like to rub the shoulders and legs of the master and your old man?" The old man said indifferently, "I don't have a coffin book, so you should just die." Zheng Dafeng said with a smile, "Master, what you said hurts people's hearts. As an apprentice, I am not very skilled, but I am full of filial piety. How can I miss those? I am not Li Erhe's daughter-in-law." The old man hummed and said, "You are worse than her." Zheng Dafeng's entire face was darkened. His head was drooping, as if frost had hit an eggplant, and he had no energy at all. However, his face suddenly became full of surprise, only to realize that what Master said today, although it is still unbearable, but it is rare to have said so much. When we return to the East Room, we can drink a pot of wine to celebrate. Zheng Dafeng was in a happy mood, and asked casually, "Brother, can you stop that guy?" This time, without waiting for the old man to stab him, Zheng Dafeng slapped himself in the face. Senior brother can't stop it before he can play. If he really stops it, he will really have to drink the northwest wind in the future. The old man asked inexplicably, "Zheng Dafeng, do you know why you are not very promising?" Zheng Dafeng was stunned on the spot. I thought that master's question was very mysterious, and I had to deal with it carefully and prepare for it. Never thought that the old man had already given the answer by himself. People are ugly. Zheng Dafeng clasped his head in his hands and looked at the rain splashing in the yard. Such a big man wanted to cry but had no tears. The head of the government office didn't have to look at his words. He knew that he was not suitable to stay any longer, and he just found a reason to leave the house. Chen Songfeng continued to bury his head in, looking at the files, but compared to Chen Edo's trembling when he was present, he finally regained a bit of the unrestrained bearing of the children of the noble family. But the more this happened, the more suffocated Liu Baqiao looked at him, and the more he felt aggrieved. It is one thing not to vomit, but it is one thing to be upright, and it is another to be open-mouthed. Chen Songfeng suddenly raised his head and smiled. Baqiao finally can't sit still. Liu Baqiao just lifted his butt from the chair, and after hearing this, he sat back down and said with an angry smile, "Yo, you are still in the mood to make fun of me. You kid can be generous." Chen Songfeng put down an old book in his hand and said bitterly, "I'm letting you see a joke. I just grieved for me. It's not that I don't know what's wrong. It's just Liu Baqiao couldn't stand the bitterness and sensational feelings of others, so he quickly waved his hand and said, Don't. I just despise the bullying of your distant relatives. So when I say something to her, it's purely because I can't control myself. You don't need Chen Songfeng?" "Thanks, Dade." Chen Songfeng leaned against the back of the chair, and exhaled softly. If it was in the Chen family's house in Longwei County, just because of this lazy sitting posture, once the elders found out, no matter the descendants, the children would all be punished, and the adults would be punished. Scholars from the wealthy and aristocratic family are often ridiculed by warriors as being sane and pretentious. But the rules are the rules. From the birth of the mother, they walk on the established path. The children of the gentry, large and small, without exception, have been fascinated by them since childhood. Of course, there is also the Nanjing country, which is rich in talkative celebrities and absurd madmen. It is famous for its words and deeds that do not stick to etiquette. Liu Baqiao asked, "What's the relationship between you and Chen Duo, and why are you so afraid of her? If it involves family secrets, I don't want to ask." Chen Songfeng stood up, went to close the door of the house, sat on the chair that was originally in charge, and asked softly. The name of the young man surnamed Liu, after many twists and turns, was finally transferred to my Longwei County Chen family. You are not curious. Why? Liu Baqiao nodded. I'm afraid that the mountain ape can't think of breaking his head, because the competitor of that sword classic is not the mortal enemy Feng Liuyuan, but the Chen clan of Longwei County who was born out of nowhere. Chen Songfeng's face was tired, and he must have been depressed for a long time all the way. Those who think too much will be tired. Finally, he can't help but find someone to vomit. In addition, he is convinced of Liu Baqiao's character and temperament. So he slowly said, "Although our Chen family has a closer relationship with your Fanglei garden, but the descendants of the Chen family abide by the ancestral teachings and do not mix in the grievances on the mountain and the mountains. Is this an exception? The Chen family is of a scholarly family, not an aristocratic family of cultivation. So what's the point of wading in this muddy water?" Liu Baqiao thought about it along the way. It's Chen Du's family who wants to keep this sword scripture in their pocket. Could it be that her family is some unborn sword cultivator? Chen Songfeng shook his head and said, "That's not the case. You also mentioned earlier that the Chen family in the small town is divided into 2 branches, and Chengdu belongs to the one that moved out first. They went so thoroughly that they didn't even wait for Dongbao Pingzhou, went directly to Biezhou, and after generations of reproduction, branches and leaves, Chendui's family has now been hailed as the master of the world. Of course, these news have never been heard in Dongbao Pingzhou. According to rumors, our Chen family in Longwei County only got to know the inside story because they have a little connection with them. Liu Baqiao sneered and said, "Is that bitch bragging about not writing drafts? Or are they bullying me?" Liu Baqiao's lack of knowledge. Can her family have a merit shop? Chen Songfeng stretched out 2 fingers. Liu Baqiao rolled his eyes and said, "Listen clearly. I said Gong Defang, not Gong Mingfang." Chen Songfeng didn't put away his fingers. Liu Baqiao was a little shriveled and continued to ask in disbelief. The academy. The academy. Can her family have it? Liu Baqiao's so-called Shuigong Academy Square is naturally the Confucian Orthodox San Shuigong 72 Academy. And it is definitely not an ordinary academy in a secular dynasty. There is a huge East Treasure Pingzhou, but there are only 2 academies on the cliff in Guanhu. Chen Songfeng slowly put away a finger, and there was one left. Liu Baqiao pretended to get up, put his hands on the handle of the chair, and pretended to be panicked. "I will apologize to that auntie quickly. I'm a good boy." With such an arrogant and unreasonable life experience, don't let you Chen Songfeng turn around. In this book, there is nothing wrong with letting you be a cow or a horse. Chen Songfeng smiled without saying a word. This is probably the unique charm of Liu Baqiao, who can tell the original embarrassing thing so that the parties are not angry at all. Liu Baqiao twisted his buttocks, wrapped his arms around his chest, and said calmly, "Okay, I know the scary origin of that grandmother, so go ahead and get to the point," Chen Songfeng said with a smile. Actually, the answer was also said by manager Zhu. Liu Baqiao suddenly had an epiphany. The ancestor of the boy surnamed Liu is the tomb guard of Chen's family who stayed in the town. Chen Songfeng nodded and said, "Ruzi can be taught." Liu Baqiao snorted. "That's not right. Didn't the sword scripture passed down by the ancestral family of Liu surnamed come from the trader in Zhengyang Mountain? Of course. He is also one of the ancestors of our Fenglei Garden. No matter what, isn't the time right? How can you become the tomb keeper of Chen Duo's family?" Chen Songfeng explained. "I can be sure that the Liu family was the tomb guardian of the Chen Duo family at first. As for the sword repairer who hid in your Fenglei Garden, why did he finally come to the town and become the Liu family? And it was passed down from generation to generation. Sword scriptures. I guess there are some hidden inside stories. So in the end, family heirlooms became 2 things. Sword scriptures, plus wart armor. As for Chengdu, she is not really interested in treasures, but just to worship her ancestors. In addition, if the Liu family, there are descendants, no matter what the qualifications, she will bring back to the family to cultivate with all her strength, which is a reward for the tomb guarding of the ancestors of the Liu family." Liu Baqiao looked unbelievable. In such a big family, let a young woman come to worship the ancestors, and then he was almost beaten to death by that big Li domain king, Chen Songfeng. I read a lot, although most of them are books about gods fighting on the bed. But I really learned a lot of human sophistication from this, so I think that bitch must be a fake. Chen Songfeng shook his head and smiled bitterly. "Then you didn't see my grandfather seeing her." "How polite." It is a taboo for the venerable, so Chen Songfeng can't really tell the truth, and can only describe it vaguely with the word kindness. The family opened the middle door for her, and the head of the family bowed to her to the end, and the whole family treated her as a guest, and asked her to sit on the throne at the reception. The impact of all this on Chen Songfeng can be imagined. Liu Baqiao wondered. The boy surnamed Liu was almost killed by that old ape, didn't he? Chen Songfeng sighed. "You said it yourself." It was almost... Chen Songfeng got up and went to the window. It was drizzling outside the window for a while, but just looking at the sky, it seemed like a torrential rain was about to happen, Chen Songfeng said softly. That Master Ruin seems to be an old acquaintance with one of Chen's elders. They used to walk the world together, and they belong to the best friends of Moni. Liu Baqiao asked tentatively, "Are you saying that Ruan Qiong can replace Qi Jingchun and sit here? Chen has contributed to the family," Chen Songfeng said indifferently. "I didn't say anything." NBSP Liu Baqiao was amazed. It's no wonder that this girl can be so tough in the face of Song Changjing. With the power of the family far away, and the protection of the saint in front of her, can she not be arrogant? Liu Baqiao suddenly asked, "Tell me about the things about the porcelain and the people who buy it. I've always been interested. But unfortunately our Feng Liuyuan didn't like this, until we were forcibly brought in by the master to be a strong man this time. Roughly heard. It seems that there are several famous people on the top of the mountain in our East Treasure Pingzhou who first walked out of this small town." Chen Songfeng hesitated for a while, but chose to know everything without saying anything, and revealed the secret. It is similar to the worldly gambling stone. Every year, more than 32 babies are born in the town. and the 29 dragon kilns are selected in order according to the top seats. A certain child is used as the porcelain of his own dragon kiln. For example, if children were born in a small town this year, then the top 2 dragon kilns can have 2 porcelains. If there are only newborns next year, the dragon kiln ranked at the bottom means that it can only be harvested for a whole year. So the people born and raised in the small town have their own lifelike porcelain. Now Chaoxi and Xieshi, who are in the limelight in this continent, are a Taoist true monarch who is expected to become a heavenly monarch and a wild Chujian with infinite killing power. Immortals are no exception. Although the fish pond in this small town is extremely easy to produce dragons compared to the outside world, the cost of transforming dragons is huge. Once these porcelains successfully enter the 5th realm, they will not be on the 5 realms during their lifetime. Is destined to have no afterlife. The soul flies away. Life after life, everything is over. I'm afraid that even the Taoist and Buddha can do nothing. During this period, the buyer of porcelain will seize the fatal handle and control life and death in the hands of others. Whether you are Cao Cao people like Xieshi are the same. Speaking of which, when you become a person like Cao Xieshi, people who buy porcelain will want to be worshipped by their ancestors. How dare they pretend to be the owner of the porcelain? After all, it is a matter of mutual benefit and reciprocity. Any family can have Cao Xieshi. With this kind of combat power, I can sleep steadfastly. The reason is very simple. Usually, it is trivial to ask for their big drivers, but when it comes to the survival of the family, they will definitely come to help, and they do not want to fight for my family. Yes, then I will smash your life porcelain, and everyone will burn the jade and stone together. Liu Baqiao was amazed when he heard it. It is no wonder that the Great Li dynasty has risen rapidly in just 200 to 300 years and has formed a magnificent momentum to annex the northern territory of Yizhou. Qin asked, I know that 6-year-old girls in a small town and 9-year-old boys are a big threshold. It is the same as our cultivation. At that time, we can know the level of future cultivation achievements if at that time, people who bought porcelain came to the town to bring them, children who are on the road. What about those porcelains that are not made into wares? Those small town children who lost the bet? Their worthless life of porcelains. How should the major dragon kilns deal with them? Chen Songfeng said softly. It will be taken out of the dragon kiln, smashed and discarded on the spot. There is a porcelain mountain outside the town, and it comes from this. Liu Baqiao felt unhappy in his heart and asked, what happened to those children? Chen Songfeng shook his head and said, I've never heard of it, so it probably won't be much better. Liu Baqiao sighed, raised his hand and rubbed his cheek. This secret matter, for which the sages of all parties personally determine the rules, is definitely not something that his little Feng Lei and Jiang Shu can dictate. But young people just feel a little unhappy. There was a long silence, and finally Liu Baqiao said softly, in this way, everyone who walks out from here is a soldier who crosses the river. Chen Songfeng followed and said, who is not on the road of cultivation. Liu Baqiao had a heartbroken heart, nodded and said, yes. The door of the house creaked softly open, and the pale-faced youth in straw sandals tiptoed over the threshold, turned and gently closed the wooden door. I also learned from Old Man Yang that he moved a small bench and sat on the steps. The raindrops were as big as soybeans, and the sky was dark as late at night. But for some reason, such a heavy rainstorm did not enter the eaves. The old man sat for a long time. There was only a little moisture on his clothes. Chen Pingan interlaced his fingers and quietly looked at the small pond formed by accumulated water in the yard. The old man was smoking dry tobacco, and large clouds of smoke filled the surrounding, but the smoke under the eaves and the rain outside the eaves. The well water invaded the river water. It was as if there was an invisible line between heaven and earth. One of the biggest reasons why the old man doesn't hate the child is that no matter what the situation is, the child will not make a fuss or disturb himself. If you can't talk annoyingly, don't open your mouth. The child is very similar to his apprentice Li Er. Sheng Dafeng is too far away, Chen Pingan said softly. Grandpa Yang, thank you for so many years. The old man frowned and said, thank me. If I remember correctly, I have never helped you in vain. When did I miss the reward? Chen Pingan smiled. Just like Old Man Yang promised himself to go up the mountain to collect herbs from the Yang family shop and then buy them at a low price, many herbs in the drugstore were also sold to Chen Pingan at a low price. It seems fair, but in fact Chen Pingan knows very well that this is the most practical help. Besides, how much is a homemade bamboo cigarette stick worth? But Chen Pingan was able to persevere for so many years, and he was free from disease and disaster all year round. To a large extent, he relied on the breathing method taught by Old Man Yang back then. The old man raised his head, looked up at the sky, and sneered. When others donate a little kindness and kindness, they would like to be regarded as a bodhisattva who saves suffering. Especially when a big man pulls out a little dregs from his teeth. He is especially grateful, and he can even be touched by his own innocence. I was moved and felt that I was repaying my kindness, so I was a loyal minister of Confucianism, a proud student of so-and-so, and euphemistically called a scholar who died for his confidant. A group of bastards who had forgotten their roots, should not have been from their mother's womb in the first place, climb out. Chen Pingan scratched his head, a little uneasy, wondering if the old man Yang was talking about himself. After the old man retracted his gaze, he said indifferently, it's not about you. Chen Pingan suddenly saw a familiar figure, so he was a little stunned. The back door of the main hall has a corridor eaves. A middle-aged scholar with frosted white temples came with an umbrella in one hand and a bench in the other. After passing through the side door, the bench was placed in the corridor, and after sitting down, he put the oil paper on it. Umbrella leaned against the stool, then patted his knees with both hands, sitting upright, and finally smiled at the old man and young man under the main eaves in the backyard, and said warmly, "Qi Jingchun of Shanya Academy. See, Mr. Yang." The boots on the Confucian's feet were soaked with rain and stained with silt, and so was the hem of his robe. The old man was in a relaxed mood and pointed at the sage with a cigarette stick. "I knew that you were unwilling on the first day you came here, but after so many years, I haven't heard any complaints from you. It's strange. You Qi Jingchun, it's not like a character who spit on his own face. So this time you lost your mind and went crazy. I guess you are a little confused outside. But I'm not surprised at all." Qi Jingchun stretched out his hand and patted his stomach, and said with a smile, "I have complaints. My stomach is full. But I just didn't say it." Old man Yang thought for a while. "I don't know your ability, but your husband, just because he dared to say those 4 words, can count as this in my eyes." Old man showing thumbs up. Qi Jingchun smiled bitterly. "Mr. is actually more knowledgeable." The old man sneered. "I'm not a scholar. Even if your husband's knowledge has surpassed that of the Holy Master, I won't say a word to him," Qi Jingchun asked sternly. "Mr. Yang, do you think our husband's 4 words are correct?" The old man laughed and said, "I don't think it's right. It's just that all the people in the world in the past believed in the previous 4 characters, and I was upset. So when someone came out to sing the opposite tone, I felt relieved. That's all." Disvan sweeps the floor, and the floor is full of chicken feathers. "I'm very happy." Qi Jingchun laughed silently. Just as Qi Jingchun was about to speak, the old man who had already understood waved his hands and said, "Don't say polite words. I don't like to listen to them. We are not the same people. We have been like this from generation to generation. Don't break the rules. Besides, you Qi Jingchun are now a rat crossing the street. Everyone shouts and fights, but I don't dare to make friends with you." Qi Jingchun nodded, got up and waved to Chen Ping'an. "I really have nothing to do, so I used the snake gallstone you sent to engrave 2 private seals, one in official script and 1 small seal, and gave it to you." Chen Ping'an ran across the pond-like yard in the rain, stood in front of Qi Jingchun, and took a white cloth bag. Qi Jingchun smiled and said, "Remember to keep it. After seeing your favorite calligraphy and painting, such as some pictures of mountains and rivers that feel good weather, you can take out your seal and press it up." Chen Ping'an nodded confusedly and said, "Okay." Old man Yang glanced at the bag in the boy's hand and asked, "Where's the word for spring?" Qi Jingchun smiled and said, "I engraved a seal earlier and gave it to a child in the Zhao family." The old man smiled and said, "Are you Qi Jingchun, a good fortune boy?" Qi Jingchun ignored the old man's ridicule and left, seeing that the young man was standing like a wooden pestle. The old man Yang laughed angrily. "I took other people's things for nothing, and I just thought about jumping home and digging into the quilt to secretly have fun. Don't know how to give it to Mr. Qi." The young man hurried to the back door of the main hall, and the old man laughed and scolded. "Bring an umbrella. Can you stand the wind and rain with your current body?" Chen Ping'an borrowed an umbrella from the shop clerk, followed Mr. Qi, and walked on the street together. The old man was always sitting under the eaves smoking a dry cigarette. The smoke was lingering, thinking of the private seals of the 2 parties. Although they were still in the bag, old man Yang could sense the clues, so he asked the word spring. Between the square inches, the big is spectacular. It didn't take long for the straw shoe boy to return to the yard, and the old man Yang asked, "What did you say at the end?" Chen Ping'an sighed and sat back on the small bench. "Mr. He said something, saying that a gentleman can bully his way." The old man Yang said sullenly, "The old men standing in the Confucian temple, their brains are broken. It is obvious that someone is targeting Shanya Academy and Qi Jingchun, and they have been standing idly by. Do you really think that you are a dead thing of clay sculpture and wood carving?" Chen Ping'an didn't hear clearly and asked, "Grandpa Yang, what did you say?" The old man was silent. "A good one is not a saint, but a gentleman.